I'm telling you, it's just a rock. I think it's just a giant rock. It was scary as hell. Like every time I would be like trying to play with the cricket ball, I'd be like, all right, go really slow when you're throwing it, because I don't want to die. All right. Oh, interesting. I think a baseball would also make this as well. All right, I sent out the link. Make sure that mutes themselves. There's a thing I can do where I can just mute everyone. This is weird because this is like one of the most important lectures that are going to be out there. Oh, there's a group. Oh wait, you have 1 more minute. Yeah, no clap. All right. Can everyone see my screen? You see me? Okay, hold on. Let me share. Can everyone see my screen? Yes? Okay. So we're gonna start with actually, this is day 3. Yeah. Ooh, yeah, this is gonna be really important. Do I have a what? No, it's in my house. Yeah, I didn't bring it with me. Yeah. You told me to take it home, right? I was like, all right, cool. I came with a free water bottle. Okay. So let's see. Today's 16th. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So building blocks are React application or components, right? So essentially, when you think about it, it's essentially the functional unit of any kind of React application is a component. And what is the mechanism by which a component exists as? Yes, correct. It's essentially just a function, right? And generally the syntax by which we use our mixed markup within the function is what? JSX, right? JSX. And so that makes React very similar to what? Yeah, handlebars, right? Because essentially the only difference is that it's not, well, I mean, there's a lot of differences, but the concept is very similar. The only difference in conceptually is that it's not server-side rendering, it's client-side, right? So you have client-side rendering working, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah, the last part about components. This part is pretty important. We organize our components into a tree-like structure with one large parent object, or sorry, I keep saying object. This is not object-oriented. With one large component, which is essentially just a function. And again, if I say object, please correct me because we're going into more functional programming now. So because this is functional programming, we have a giant function that is going to contain all of our other components. And our components within those components are just subcomponents, and then they each have subcomponents as well, right? Everything that gets returned from React, is it going to still be in JSX once it gets rendered? No, what does it get rendered as? Yeah, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Everything in there, because your browser can only understand 3 languages, right? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All right, so this is what our application kind of looked like last time, right? We had an app, and then we had some other components within them, and those components had other subcomponents. All right, so component architecture like that allows for a lot of different things. This is actually an important picture to think about because this is how we're going to be structuring our application. I mean, it's very similar to how you build your UI on the client side anyway, right? If you were to template it out, you'd probably build it something like this, right? So it still has that parental hierarchy. Cool. I just want to have you guys look at it for a couple seconds. All right. So when using this concept of components, we have essentially the fundamental, well, I guess it's the same concept. The same concept we've been going over in for project 2, which is further what? Modularization, right? Correct. So we have further modularization. So we're trying to modularize as much as possible. But with React components, not only are they modularized, but what are they also? Or what can they be? Not just modularized, self-contained, right? So that concept of being self-contained is really important because each component is independent. And it's not like you might think self-contained, isn't that coupled? It's actually not coupled, right? Because coupling is generally bad. Lewis works with a terrible framework, ASP 123, no, ASP.NET, right? A lot of coupling there probably, right? A lot of coupling. Like a lot of things tied to each other, so making any change ties into other things. Yeah, bad, right? So React, good, because we are using decoupling of things. So when you decouple, what happens is when you're refactoring applications, it becomes a lot easier. And also when you're building on top of it, you reduce technical debt over time. Sure, in the beginning, it's easier to actually have everything in one place and have things tightly coupled. But as you're doing that, I think it was like an XKCD comic or something like that, where it was like, they're like, oh, like we're initially like building something, we're going so fast. And then like they're digging a hole as like miners, but then like that accrues a lot of technical debt. And you realize like all that time you're digging, it's like you're putting like that dirt just like behind you. And then you're like digging yourself into a hole, literally, right? Instead of like actually creating something, you're just creating more debt over time, all right? So you don't want to increase the complexity of an application. You want to reduce the stress and increase the overall ease of being able to add new members, add new features, debug, test. Testing goes with debugging though. And all those other fancy things that come with scaling an application, right? And again, no buzzwords. What does scaling mean essentially? Yeah, just essentially you increase the scope of the application, right? If I need to handle more users or handle more, even if I don't need to handle more users, handle more input of data from the same users over time, that's scaling the application, right? I could also say scaling means more of my developers are able to then use the application, right? Without running into technical debt. We already know this, JSX. Oh yeah, what's one difference between JSX and the handlebars curly braces? They're both very similar, right? Exactly, JSX allows for any kind of what? JavaScript? Any kind of JavaScript code, yeah. So any kind of JavaScript expression, right? You can actually write full JavaScript expression. I think now we can, yes. Wait, is there a puppy? Puppy, wait, here. Hi. You're not mine. Okay. No. Okay. So. You need help? Yeah, I just need a name. No. So the way that we used JavaScript or JSX last time is we allowed JavaScript to be passed in directly into our component. So we created some components. Did we create any state-based components though? What kind of components did we create? What did I name them? Well, what kind of, no, the type of components. What do we call them? You guys remember? Stupid components, something like that? Oh, yeah, dumb components, right? So we created dumb components. Oh. So dumb components are essentially stateless components, right? And I don't want to call them stateless components yet because we haven't gone over the concept of state. State is really important, and that concept is going to be more of a development principle that you're going to see across a lot of different languages. Maintaining state is something that you're going to do everywhere, probably, as you guys are developers. Oh, I'll let him go too far. Or not. Okay, so today we're going to be working with props, statefulness, and then going away from this just basic functional component into stateful components, and then maintaining the state across different components. Right? And when we say maintaining state across different components, you'll see that we're going to be passing in data from component to component. Now this is where people actually get really confused because we have a one-way or a unidirectional data flow, right? A one-way or, again, same thing, just different terminology. Unidirectional data flow means that data goes one way, goes from top to bottom. Similar to like, I would think of it as like a parental hierarchy, where like the parent gives something to the child, and the child then gives it to like their child, or something like that, right? Like things like that. Huh? Yeah, like hand-me-downs, but for data, right? So that's an easy way to look at it. I think that's pretty much what we're going to be covering today, because there's going to be a lot for that. We know we use JSX curly braces. Thank you. Yeah. Hi guys.
Sorry about that. We have a plan.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Priority number one right now.
Thank you. They're so nice. Always so nice. So the way that we pass down data from component to component is through props. Props always be confusing for people, but what are they essentially if all React components are just functions? They're essentially just arguments that get passed down from function to function, right? So React very much uses, in the way that it's created, functional programming. And the way that we actually pass components, the props from one component to another, is just as attributes in the attribute like syntax to a function. So it's not really an attribute, but it looks like it's an attribute to an HTML element. But of course, these components that we're creating are not HTML elements, they're JavaScript functions. So when we pass them in, they're going to be passed as attributes. So it's going to look like they're attributes, but it's only attribute like syntax. So this I actually do want to show. Now over here we have a function, alert equals prop. So this is using the ES6 version of the function. So notice that over here we have a div being returned. One difference in JSX is that you will need to use class name instead of class. That's just because class is a reserved keyword. So small stuff. Hello.
So the room next door is working. You want to go move there?
Oh, it's not that big of a deal. We're using Zoom right now, so it shares it across everyone's screen
Everybody's
anyway.
on Zoom?
Yeah, is everyone on Zoom? Yeah, would you guys prefer moving to a different classroom, or you guys just prefer Zooming? All for Zoom, raise your hands. Okay, there we go.
Everyone with laptops.
Yeah, everyone with laptops. Yeah, which is everyone. Yeah.
Okay, but it's open, you know, and it works.
Oh, okay, I appreciate
It'll
it.
all fit in.
It's not that big of a deal. Wait. Hold on. Wait. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. Come back, Frank. All right. So our class name is essentially the same as a class inside of your HTML markup, right? However, again, because class is a reserved keyword in ES6, actually not in ES6, in JSX specifically, we can't use class, right? So we have to use class name. Another thing, you guys notice some interesting syntax for what's happening inside of the class name? Yeah, why are we using an expression for pipes? What does all that mean? There's so much going on there. Can anyone try to decipher what that means? I'll give you guys a little bit of time to decipher that. Take about a minute, and then I'll call on you guys. Today's what? Third, okay. Okay, so can anyone tell me what that means? It's a little confusing, right? It's a lot of new syntax. So first, let's break it down, right? So we have a curly brackets. That means what? Well, all of this is actually JSX. What does it mean within JS? Again, anything after that function line is actually JSX. So what does that mean? So that's a JavaScript expression being run, right? So there's a JavaScript expression inside the curly brackets. So if there's an expression that needs to be run, then what's going to happen is we have a what data type so far? What is the data type? Yeah, it's a string, right? But it's also using a different kind of thing. It's not just using a typical string. What kind of thing is it using? Backticks. Yeah. So it's using, well, so it's using the, Mike, what is the syntax again? Template literal. There we go. So it's using the template literal syntax, right? So you have a string, alert, alert, but the second alert has the template literal syntax. Do you guys remember that? When using backticks inside of template literals, what does it allow you to do? Pass in JavaScript into a string. All right. So what is props? So props.type, again, if props is an argument being passed into this function, that means this dot type is probably a property of this object props being passed in. And we learned from truthy and falsy before, right? If it's true, then the result is going to be what? So if, well, okay, so can you give me the end result exactly? So if it did exist, what would it be? So for example, over here, this will actually resolve to either or to that. Can you tell me why?
It's initializing the type property, so if you don't specify what the type is, then it'll just default into it.
Correct. So what's happening is the first argument inside of this expression over here is a conditional. And it says if the props.type is true, then what's going to happen is the props.type is going to be the answer and what gets resolved out of that expression. However, if it's false, then it goes to info, right? So out of this template literal, what's going to happen is instead of all of this, it's either going to be this danger or info. Now, why did I say danger? Can you, it is part of that. Do you guys, it's not invalid password. It's what? Explain it in a more technical way. I know what you mean. But we just explained before that props get passed into components via attributes. Therefore, based off of that data, what can you infer?
Take whatever attribute I guess gives it.
So it will take whatever attribute the component gives it and converts that into the data that gets passed in. Close, I would rephrase it to be that the prop being passed, the props being passed into alert, in this case, there's a single prop. It's called type. The value of that prop is danger. So that what happens is when you pass in the prop, you can access the props.type and it will return danger. You guys see that? Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So, yeah, so this is going to be the component, and also this doesn't actually exist, right? This is going to be what it resolves to. Oh, God damn it. Sorry. There we go. So what happens is, this is actually the end result, by the way, this up top over here. So what happens is, this is our function definition. But inside of React, what is our function definition called? It's a component, right? This is our component, right? So we're defining a component called alert. It takes in the props parameter. It has a div that gets returned. The div has a class. And what classes does it have? It has two classes, alert and either alert-danger or alert-info, depending on what gets passed in. However, because we've initialized or instantiated our app to be the following, it is always going to have type equals danger. So this is us in defining the app. Oh, sorry, defining the alert component. I keep saying app. This is defining the alert component. This is us creating another component, right? What is this component called? App. So in the same file, we have two components that we've defined, right? Generally, you don't do that. You generally have one component per file. This is just a way of showing an example. In this second instance over here, we have the utilization of our alert component, right? So this is essentially the same thing as a function call, right? This is essentially a function definition, except it's a React function definition, meaning that it's a React component. Over here, we have a what? Yeah, it's a component call essentially, right? So we're using the React component that we defined earlier. So it goes along the same concepts you guys have learned before and extends those concepts. They're not entirely new concepts. They're just extended a little bit. Okay, I want you guys to see that pattern. So over here we see alert type equals danger. That type is what? Those attributes being passed into a component are considered what? Yeah, props, right? So props are just properties that get passed in. He let me know ahead of time he's gonna be late yesterday because he had to get his car fixed too and pick it up. So just golf clap, I guess. Okay. So now we have our alert. And again, I'm going through a lot, I know, but that's why this is being recorded. I know it's a lot. This is where people start to get really confused, right? It's like, what the hell just happened? There's so much new syntax, so much that we just did in just such little code. But I swear it gets easier and easier the more you practice it. So this component is taking in a prop. It's only one prop, and the prop is type. The value of that prop is danger, right? Now, this is the next thing. This is actually the child of this component. But that actually makes sense, right? If this is a component, and this is the content within a component, that means it's the child of the component, right? Anything within the tags, just like you would in HTML. If you have anything within the tags of an element, that's a child of that element. You guys remember your DOM? You guys remember your DOM, document object model, right? If you have things like this, so let me show you real quick. If I have something like this, I can type correctly. Let me see, I don't know, meow, or h1, whatever. I mean, this isn't gonna render and actually work in the file. This is just showing you like DOM stuff. So if we have something like this, what is the parental hierarchy? What is a familial relationship? What is parent? What is child? Div is parent. H1 is child. The H1 element is a, yeah, so yes, exactly. And then there's also another child, right? This content is actually, God damn it. This content is a child to the H1 as well. All right. If I do this, I can even have multiple, right? These are all children of what? The parent tag, I'm sorry, the paragraph tag and the H1 tag are all part of what? Yes, the div. And they're children of div. Okay. Oh, okay. So we have invalid password over here. And this is a child of, what is this invalid password a child of? Yes, it's a child of alert. Therefore, the way to call it inside of React, if we want this to render, because we have to explicitly call to render, is within the function definition, meaning the component definition, well, we have to put props.children. And this will render the child's data that you passed in. Because this is still data that you're passing in, right? Is this our component definition based on my intonation? No, right? Isn't it really Gucci? Oh my God. Get out of here. All right. Gucci, man. He needs a Gucci sweater. All right. So we have invalid password is an argument, essentially, or a prop. It's actually a prop, right? So there's two props being passed in. The first is type, and the other one is a child prop, which is a different type of prop. What is the child prop in this case? Invalid password. Okay, do you guys see that? So again, when we're doing this, are we doing a component call or a component definition? Component call. Where's our component definition? Yeah, right above it, right? Right above it. This is all component definition. All right? And this is doing what? It's rendering the app component, which again, because we have a familial hierarchical nature of how this works, everything gets set as a tree. The app is the main component. Within that, you have the alert components. And then you have other stuff, and other stuff, and other stuff. All right? Not so bad once you look at it, right? Once you break it down, it's not so bad. Then you get used to it, and then it's like baby stuff. So we already know this, React on-route render. We only use this once, though. Questions? Always. Okay. Okay, so now we're gonna do more calculator stuff. Surprise, surprise. So I know all of you guys are excited about working with calculators again, because y'all are nerds. So activity 24, Stu props calculator. Go to that. I want you guys to work on this on your own. It says partners, but remember, self-efficacy. I want you guys to build it up. You guys have been doing really well on that self-efficacy, by the way. I've been noticing a lot of you guys doing really well on algorithms and being able to answer questions on your own and researching on your own. Keep that up. Don't fail me now. About 10 minutes to work on this. Activity 24. You guys are going to be passing props. And props are just arguments being passed into a function. And I don't want you guys to ask each other or the TS questions until 7 minutes in. So about 7 minutes, I'll allow questions. Unless you guys are having like your computer doesn't work, kind of weird, funky shit going on.
Dude, last time we played, we took like 5
I mean, it was fun, but at the same time, like, I know it's probably a picture. What is it? It was music. It's like,
Yeah. Then you can also shout.
yeah.
It needs
Yeah, I think there was a picture that was but then it's not like when you it's so many but I mean, it's like it's easy to strategize this thing as actual.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's fun.
It looks so worth it. Yeah, the next one was a double. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, no, people read it. It's when you're. No, the free react actually creates all files. When you run start that doesn't serve. That's an okay question. Oh my God, this one. How much? It's like next Saturday. Just most.
This is like one of the most important lectures, and like so many people are missing. I don't know. It's so weird. I kept emphasizing how important like the next week and a half is. Huh? Yeah, we don't have class Monday, but today's super important. All right, now you guys can ask questions, discuss with each other. Oh yeah, Chuck, I wasn't talking about you, by the way, because you're already online. I'm talking about the people in class. So Chuck's online, Michelle's online. I'm talking about those people who are not online or in class. There's a lot. I think Vu's online as well. Or is Vu here? Oh, Vu, you're here. I just saw your message, so I was like, okay, Vu's online. Oh, Vu, you're online. Yeah. Oh, and Lewis is online too. There's a bunch of people. Oh yeah, those who are online, make sure you guys, so Lewis just sent me a good reminder. Make sure you guys send me your, again, not for those in class, but if you guys are gonna do this online, you guys should let me know ahead of time, and then you do have to send a one-page summary about what was covered in class as well. All right, so let's go through this real quick. Oh yeah, and Vu, I received yours, and Lynn, I received your one-page summaries as well. Did I already respond back to you guys about that? Yeah, I did. Vu, did I respond to you? Yeah. Okay. Cool. I have memory of a fish, so I don't remember these things. Okay. So again, what's happening over here is they give you the source folder. If they're giving you just a source folder, how are you supposed to run the application? Yeah, you just copy into Create React App, right? Oh, hey, you cutie. So you just copy it into your Create React App, and you replace what? Yeah, the source folder. So it's pretty simple. Just replace. If you guys do want to keep a copy of all the code changes you made over time, you are going to have to create a new React app for each activity. It's not hard because you just literally have to run Create React App and then the name of whatever you want to create. So it's not that much more work, but you are going to have to do that if you want to keep all those changes. Okay. So in this one, it was open up the calculator.js in your editor and then look at some of the code. Write a component named math and run one math component in the place of each question mark. The math component should perform some arithmetic using 3 props. So num1, a number, an operator, which represents any of the operators that we used before, and num3, a number. Although that should be num2. I don't know why it says num3. The math component should render the results of a problem in a span tag. So if we take a look at some of this, we have our calculator.js. So this calculator.js is creating a new component called calculator. This one is not rendering the math component yet because we haven't created the math component. Once you've created the math component, it's going to accept 3 props and then return the calculations based off that. So if we were to create a math component, the math component would take in 3 different props, right? So how are props passed into a component? As arguments, like as in, and the syntax is like what? It's like HTML attributes, exactly, right? It's very similar to HTML attributes, right? So if we were to do this, and if we take a look at the calculator.js, are we defining this math component over here? No, we're importing and we're not instantiating. What is the same thing we use for functions when we use them? We're calling the React components, right? We're calling them. So in this case, you can even say use. Yeah, but I think the syntax I would use, if something is a function, I would say we're calling them, right? So in this case, we're calling the math components, and we're saying 19 plus 142. And again, this is all static data, right? Why is this static? Why am I saying it's static data? How is it static? Doesn't change, right? The num1, 19, and num2, 142, are these numbers that are constantly updated based off like some dynamic query? 9. These are what? Yeah, they're just like me saying, okay, I'm statically typing this information in. The operators are also hard-coded. The operators are fine to be hard-coded. But notice that we're also starting to get some reusability. Reused our component how many times? How many times? 4. 4 times, right? So, yeah, so we used their component 4 times, right? Again, the arguments you notice that we're passing in, they're props. Notice that we can pass in a string on its own, but if we pass in data that we want to keep the data type as, what do we have to do? What? Curly braces. If you want to keep the data type as number or expression or a function or something, you have to keep the curly braces here, okay? So let's take a look at our math component. So our math component is just the same thing as we've always done when we create the same stupid calculator, right? The algorithm's the same, right? Do you guys notice the difference in the algorithm? The only difference is what? Shut up. Attention to detail. What's the main difference? I'm gonna throw this ball at it there. What's the main difference? How are we passing our arguments in this time? Yeah, using props, right? Correct. So the props object, again, the props object is being passed in. The props object contains all of the different props that were passed in previously, right? So any props you pass in, they get attached to the props object. If you pass in props.num1, num2, operator, any of that, it gets attached to what? The props object. Therefore, you can access the properties of the object using what kind of notation? Dot notation, right? Easy. So, all right. What else? Why are you looking at me? You're so cute. Okay. And I don't think I need to go over this algorithm. I think you guys know this like a billion times over. We've done this literally, I think like 10 times. So this over here is actually not part of our JSX, right? This is where we actually start using our JSX part. Notice that we're returning the value at the end along with the font size with the value. I don't know why they decided to use value for font size. It's odd, but they always do it. It's just funny to me. I'm just like, okay, cool. This is interesting. That means the value is also going to determine like the size of the font that you pass in as well. So if you run it, you'll see like crazy different font sizes. Like the multiplication one will give you like a huge font size. All right, any questions about that? Not so bad, right? Passing data as props. Again, thinking of them as what being passed to what? Being passed to a? Arguments being passed to a? Function, right? Exactly. Was this number 24? Why is it telling me to review it again? Oh, props review. Okay. So activity 25 is going to be a props review. Again, try to do this on your own. Go through the README. First 7 minutes. So until 11:06, 11:16. Do not ask each other questions. Don't ask us questions unless there's something critical that you're getting stuck on, or something conceptual that's outside of this activity.
So, this is a trade, Terry models for everyone to do.
I feel like both of those things are just games for you.
Yes. Oh, dude, I like this program.
Shut up.
Okay, you guys can talk to each other about it.
Sense of danger. You said danger? Isn't he confused? Look at your phone. It's not a ball. Yeah.
He is a sweet player. Yeah, if they're well behaved, yeah. On Saturday, yeah. If they're well behaved, no food can be it, right? No. Yeah, it can't bark and it can't, food be it. Ah.
Okay. Actually, do you guys need a few more minutes for this? Yeah? Okay. This one's a little bit more tricky. Alrighty. What are we doing again? 25? 25. Oh, before I forget, make sure you guys are starting to finalize your Project 3 groups. You guys can either work on independent projects for Project 3, or you can work in a group. For Project 3, if you are going to work on an independent project, make sure you guys let me know ahead of time. I am more flexible with Project 3. The independent project should be something more advanced if you're trying to do it on your own, or there should be a very specific reason. Otherwise, groups of 3 and 4 are good again. That's something I really want to emphasize, is that you guys should have a really great project for Project 3. So really think about that ahead of time now, all right? You guys should start working on it as soon as possible. All right. So for this one, we have SpongeBob. This has to do with modularization, to reutilize the same component instead of rendering 3 separate components by using the function aspect of a component. Which means that we're essentially just saying, instead of using 3 different components, use 1 component, and the differences are small, so the only changes could be done through props, right? The changes are essentially just the data, not the overall structure. So let's take a look at this. So it says, inside of source app.js, remove the imports for each friends card and create a new friend card. So it started off with 3 different cards, I think. It's like Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Squidward. And so you want to then consolidate those into a single component called friends card or friend card. From there, what we're going to do is we pass in the data that would go to each of those components and instead consolidate it into a single friend card component with the properties of name, image, occupation, and location. Blah, 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 blah. That's pretty much it. So this has to do with props and how we use them to consolidate into single functions. And this is what we've already been doing, right? You guys know that if you have the reutilization of functions, you're essentially just reusing functions and then modifying the functions to contain multiple arguments. Or sorry, that they can take multiple arguments. This does not apply if the structure is being changed. You can reutilize components with different data, but only if the data is changing, not if the structure is changing, okay? So if we rebuild it, then instead of 3 different cards, we now have a single friend card, the structure is going to remain the same, right? The CSS and the content, the CSS and the markup is going to look the same, but the data is going to be dynamic now instead of static, right? Again, concepts that I want you guys to understand. I could be saying this about like any other like library that might come out. They might have similar concepts to these. I want you guys to understand the pros and cons and why we're doing this, right? So why are we taking 3 cards and putting them into one instead? Or 3 components and putting into one component? Reusability, right? And what's the other principle we're trying to use? Huh? Don't repeat yourself, right? Dry. That one's huge, right? It's one of the principal standard software engineering principles. So I just used 2 verbs that mean the exact same thing. So I'm just tired. So we have props.name and props.image. So again, when we pass in attributes, when we pass in props to a component, when we call the component, how do we pass them in? In what similar syntax that we've used before with HTML do we pass them in as? Again, the question is my verbiage just like too confusing? I'm trying to use less fancy syntax, but like I want you guys to get used to like how you would talk as a developer, right? So if I were to say as like a senior engineer on your team, and I would say like I was like questioning you about like how React works, and I would say, okay, so how does React pass information in? And you'd say, well, it's similar to how what works. How does data get passed? I mean, what kind of syntax are we using? Similar to what? No, well, before it gets to the dot notation, how are we passing in the data? Attributes. So that's similar to what? HTML. It's similar as how you would set data inside of HTML, right? So you'd pass, again, you can reformat that, you can you can play with it a little bit, you can say it in your own words, but that's just one example of how you'd say it, right? So you pass that data in, similar to you would with attributes in HTML, and that data then comes out on the other side as part of a what object? Part of the props object. Now, you can access those properties inside of the objects using what kind of notation? Dot notation. Then you have access to each one of these properties, and when you use them in these curly braces expressions, what is the result? The what of the property? Value of the property, right? This is all very jargon specific, but it just makes you better as a developer when you talk in like the specific syntax. It's like, imagine like, the same shit as like lawyers and like nurses and like anyone, like, any specific thing on the job, you use that lingo and it makes it a lot more concise. You don't want to just be like, the thing with the thing, and then it goes into stuff, and then, junk happens. They might understand you, but they might not. Then be like, can you clarify again? And then it takes longer. If you just say it one sentence, it's like, I know what you mean. Cool, let's go do it. Like, you're trying to be efficient with your time. Engineers are all about efficiency, annoyingly so. I think you guys know that I'm like annoying about efficiency. But I try to push that into you guys because when you guys work at companies, that's generally going to be the same thing if they're a good development company. Right? You don't want to work somewhere where they're like, just do the thing. Right? That's, I mean, you're probably working in Hollywood then or something. It's a marketing agency. All right, questions about that before we move on? 9? Yeah. So, good question. So, if you were to say, which one? Props.name? Excellent question. Excellent question. So that goes. So Luis brings up a great point. It's like, well, going into do not repeating yourself. Is there a way that we can just make this more efficient by maybe looping over this? Yes, and that's what we're going to transition into as well. I think that actually might be the next activity. Yeah, it is literally the next activity. So good job, Luis. He caught it. So far, Juan and Luis, you guys been thinking ahead. So let's get to activity 26. Again, no questions? All 7 minutes.
I would imagine it's. Oh, oh, pretty good.
There's a gas leak.
There was a gas leak.
There's a gas leak here.
Where?
It was hissing out gas this whole time. I was like, what the hell's happening? There's like, this is for propane. There's an actual propane gas leak here. I was hissing the whole time. I was wondering, I was like, yeah. I just closed the valve. Sure. Never stop, won't stop. What's up, everyone? I thought it was just a static electricity. The hissing was actually, yeah. I forgot to sell hissing loud. Oh, how are you doing?
Okay, so number 125.
Oh, yeah, so the shock.
Did it work? What do you guys think? Oh, this is on. This is okay. So. So look at the prior example. So, how do you think this one?
All right. So this one's a little bit more tricky. This uses something that we covered on Monday and Tuesday. Do you guys remember? Really, Mike? This is why I can't give you anything. All right. So the standard way to loop over things inside of ES6 within React is to use map. So what we're going to do is solve for an inefficiency that Luis mentioned, right? So what did Luis mention? What was the inefficiency that we had? No, that's the efficiency method. What is the inefficiency that we had? Yeah, it was dry repeated code. Oh, sorry. It was not dry repeated code. It needed to become dry. Yeah? It was wet. Just sounds weird. I don't like it. It's like saying moist. As soon as you said it, you're like, I feel weird. It just doesn't. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's, we're using it the other context, but it just sounds, there's too many connotations that can go along with it. So we won't use that. We're just going to say not dry. Okay. So why don't we go to how to use that? And it's, if we take a look at the solution over here, it's interesting because you'll notice that props is an object, but it has, in this case, something like a groceries, right? So it has an array. So what we can do is, if we had the friends card, and the friends card had multiple properties being iterated over it, you can run them over. You can loop through them and iterate different ones. The same thing can happen with groceries over here. So what we're doing first is we're passing in this props.groceries, and we're saying map over this. So in this case, instead of having to repeat everything that we do, we use props.groceries.map. And what does this do? What does map do? Loops over and generates a new set of things based off of the parameters that you pass in, right? So this is okay. You can just look it up. And the callback function inside of the map higher order function takes in a single argument. I think it can actually take a couple, but the one that we're using, it takes in a single argument. Each argument represents what? Inside the function. What does the item represent? Each blank instead of a what? Yes, but explain it in a different way. Yes, you're correct, but it's not just index. It's specifically. No, it's not a child. So it's a map, right? It's looping through groceries. So each item represents. It would in this case. I don't know if it's an object. What's a more higher level explanation of something inside of a something? I don't want to give it away. I want you guys to get. This is just getting better at technical things. Each element within the array, correct? Each element within the array, right? So item represents the element within this array. So you have element item within the groceries array, right? Because you're using map on arrays. So this groceries that gets passed in over here is an array of objects. Each object is an element, right? So, however, again, map doesn't know what kind of data type that you're passing in, so it's always just going to be an element. That's the syntax that you guys would, or the jargon that you guys would use. So you generate a list item, give it a class name, and now there's something else. It says key equals item ID. Did anyone look up the key? What the key means? No? It's a what? In a map, specifically when relating to React, it actually means something else. Yeah, this is actually separate. Good guess though, but this is something very specific to just React and using the map to loop over something. Wait, can you repeat that? So what does that mean? That is the mechanism by how it works, but and that's good. So it's good that you're able to understand, but why? Why does it do that? Because of what? That's part of it. What's another reason? What's the main reason for it in React? What does it mention? Yeah, so that it can update the DOM more easily. What actually happens is the update to the DOM is used by this key. The key is actually unique to using map inside of React. Because what happens is when you use this unique identifier, each element needs to have a unique identifier when using map, or it's preferred to do so. The reason is because that way React is able to then granularly be able to say, oh, okay, I know exactly where these elements are. And then I can map it to my React virtual DOM. And I'm able to then granularly say, like, only the things that need to change specifically in this map then need to get updated. I don't need to redo the entire map. All right. So it actually it's an efficiency technique. So again, this is a unique identifier for when using the loop so that you don't have to re-loop through everything else. And then the only change to a specific item can just be updated. And instead of having to use like O of n, it becomes O of 1. You guys haven't learned big O notation yet. I just realized that. It means that it runs way faster than trying to loop through the whole thing and then update one thing. Right? Big O. Yeah. I'm regular sized O. Average O. Okay. So item.name. This is just the property of item. I mean, again, this is iterating over each element. So if it happens to be an object, then you can use property values to then display them as you will. Again, because this is a child of this component, I think actually, no, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Because they're explicitly displaying it. Yeah. Okay. So any questions about that one? So generally the key that we get, again, the data that we're looping through, it usually comes from a database, right? So that means it usually comes with a unique identifier or an ID. So generally when we're looping over stuff that's coming from somewhere else, we will have a unique identifier for it, right? So it becomes pretty easy. You just say key equals, you know, whatever the data we're getting, .id, right? So not too bad. All right, so, oh wait, it's almost 12. Okay, so why don't we go get some breakfast? We'll come back at 12:40, and then we're gonna go over stateful components.
He has to step in because like his brother had died and they had so much invested.
Oh, She got what? I can't have it. Ooh, it smells good. Oh, yeah, that sucks. My friend had to do that. It's true. People are Brazilian as well. Black beans, berries, like crazy. Like, have you ever had feijoada?
Yeah.
It's a traditional Brazilian sweet. It's
usually you can find something keys, since each key has one key type you just have to give them the key and you can assume what you hash. If you kind of want to do that, maybe not as technically. What? Okay, maybe try this. I'm not going to provide a pictorial representation instead. What? What's wrong? Pictures are good. I'm sure you have your own collection of pictures. While I'm uploading scans to my computer, there are a lot of them. Pictures and something. Okay, all right, so. Okay, so it's all about, like, this is all in the name of more efficiently finding things. So usually, the traditional find algorithms is if you wanted to figure out where in the world Y is, you have to check this one, this one, this one, this one. Right. So this traditional search is table 10. Because then in worst case scenario, you have to search the whole tree. The keys, on the other hand, and some of the search is way faster because since we already know the ID of the thing we want to find, we just gotta grab its key, and that key will immediately point to the thing, which is helping us find things faster. That's all. Like think of it like you know how it's kind of like if you were trying to find which locker your thing is, if you don't remember the number of your locker, you're supposed to check up your locker one by one. But if you do know the number of your locker, you just go to it directly. That's why the key's there to help us find things way quicker. Like the locker example, like without a key, it would be analogous to a traditional algorithm where you have to check every single locker one by one to stumble upon the thing, which obviously can take disastrously long if you search for locker first. I don't think you have to. I'm pretty sure you could also accomplish this before. Just that map is when you're looking and it's a key-made function, so it probably runs faster too. But I don't think you have to. I think you could use it before. Because Bootstrap Groceries is an array. So yeah, so without like the LI tags and stuff, it's not going to display. So I think to just display JSON. Let's see. Yeah, that doesn't. Yeah, I did not put list tags the first time. So when I first did this, we just had all the names in spaces. An object. Wait, you mean like everything in the object? You wrote. You would have to do something similar to this where you want to look nice in list tags or your own div tags or something. You just want to blast the words enough. Usually use a word or whatever, and maybe like the lines. Wait, did it give there? I guess not. If you want, if for whatever reason you want to be object of I'm sure. What's this smart explanation? I don't understand how we want to do this.
Yeah, because in a way I'm trying to help you so you don't kill yourself. What if I want to kill myself? Like, what the hell? What happens to free will then? Not for any reason, you want to kill yourself. You can't do that either. And why is it a little bit? I don't know, I'm gonna tell you something. You know, people living in a wrestling day. Right, welcome. And you're talking to your mom. Welcome. I take you downtown. That's a good picture. Don't press on the canvas.
I have no idea what it is. You should slide that.
No, press on the canvas.
Why not slide it right now? Pretty much you'll get it about that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I just finished this job before. For graphics. What kind of should only go to? Anyways, it's a step on that.
For what was that?
For computer stuff.
But like, I thought it was more like a hobby thing, like a skill that you picked up. I didn't think it was an actual like thing that you do as a job.
Oh, I didn't do that. I'm waiting on this analog now that it's good off. Maybe 5 or 10,000. So, yeah, because I've been like 6 months with the top of it.
For what reason do you have to learn?
I did, I got it training because I wanted to bring my comics and all that too. It's about
Wait, so why you just kind of
I
like
would go to conference to like just that amount for marketing campaigns. They can use that.
what was the point of that? Just you might know their feedback.
So I don't have to. You see that little dog that was like on a little wheelchair? Yeah. He looked so happy.
Yeah. You know your burger is baked, and when the chicken and shit tastes like coffee. So they probably put the wrong chemical mix in that shit. Chicken tastes like chicken, that is not whatever this is.
They have that pancake burger and I want to try it.
Oh, are you talking about that burger or where?
They have the
That burger they had it, the impossible burger.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like it.
This one's a fucking Oscar Mayer sausage. Burger, a burger, not a fucking hot dog. I know they put all this lettuce that to make it seem like I'm eating nothing and shit, but I'm eating right now.
It takes a salad.
I'm trying to do a grass fed I know I know.
This came out good.
Yeah.
I'm telling you to slack it out, it could be funny.
Oh, I'm really surprised.
We can actually like print it.
On canvas. We can hang it up on like. In the living room, I'll sit here like watching the living room. All like big pages, like.
Whenever you finish it, you should show a little bit early, you just put it on the paper.
Yeah. Put it on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd save you $60.
They were selling it for $60.
You should just, ask them for it, so they don't be paid.
My budget is all.
But everyone put in $1.
Now I can make a channel for every one of the fucking class.
Without them.
Fried chicken with like chicken and the hamburger. I don't trust restaurants that hide the kitchen from. I see that shit in you. Like how do you hide from? Didn't have it. I didn't know. It's like right there, like, so then you're gonna see it. I'm glad that you can see them like targeting the meat like from
And McDonald's, you don't get it in food. It's also like your,
I mean, it's dumb. I remember.
Same thing with the Olive Garden.
oh, really? That's not.
Oh, but I didn't mind to go there.
Even like they're,
I don't know.
they're,
Maybe that's
If it's Parmesan.
The fucking bomb, you can't go wrong with that pasta.
No.
Very cheap.
Like,
You eat a whole plate of that shit, and you're like, oh, do you want this, or do you this? No, all fucking pasta. Just pasta, for pasta. Same.
I like olive oil. I don't know where they're at.
That's what you're doing. That's stupid. What do you do like that?
Then you did kind of like.
Wait, where you around, whatever you're doing, West Hollywood?
There's nothing, if I want like fried chicken, I have to go like stop. And you have to,
Yeah, no, it's funny, like right here around this area, you can't, there's like no fucking Walmart close by. so-
Yeah.
Oh, that's it, that's the weird, that's something you can do.
have a hospital.
That's funny, it's fucking funny that there's no Walmart here, like. I said something. Every 4% should be more hard. Feel the tumors forming.
That doesn't make it that bad, that's true.
Come on, how healthy you should. Feel the tumor like forming around.
And what I like.
This country doesn't make people smoke. They can't even eat healthy food. I know, right? Fucking ironic. Except Gamma, but I don't know Gamma Gamma. I mean, I haven't had it. It's the most. I don't know how satisfied you would be with just eating memes.
So satisfied that that would make the times look like me. It tastes like me.
I feel like I'm gonna be the last and carrying as soon as I see a pair of buffalo.
I'm like a fake vegetarian. Only good because it's a healthier option. So if I'm like probably on my own,
No, out of preference, yeah, I could try to eat buffalo.
I always order vegetarian.
But it doesn't satisfy, it really doesn't.
Sometimes that's sometimes you try the stuff in the menu that you don't really require, and they put a lot more flavor on it. But like the Impossible Meat Burger, that's sometimes
I tried that shit at that burger.
maybe you're not very there, but
What was that?
I had it from mommy. I was like, man, I was very tasty.
I tried mine from that burger. It was that bad. But they make it seem like it's like just fucking meat. Nah.
Yeah.
It tastes like dry.
How do you gonna be mad
crumbled together.
together?
Without even-
You know, like the beef bouillon.
You just yeah.
That is the chicken patty. I like
Is that a microwave? Oh, but they're frozen.
Yeah. That's like, it's not like I lost weight. My body. Well, it's just vegetarian, so.
That's why we get the date once I put it on.
At least you have to know those food. Makes you feel so good.
Yeah, I think the big ones.
No, I like the extra spicy, the black cat.
Look, I can't. Like, I have a craving of it, but I can't even finish the dollar. I actually don't comfort me without my stomach hurting. So when I do want to eat the temptation and the craving, I just a little 50 cent.
Oh, the little like baby
Yeah,
bag.
so a little small, just like it's like savor the flavor. It's even good. So you eat like multiple. So you feel like you like
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's okay. No, I just put some lemon. But you don't need your hair like that? Put lemon. Well, that's nice. Little strip or lemon. That means if you put lemon, that means. Yeah, like usually with the folks I've seen, like they'll put lemon, and then that you.
Why didn't you just buy hot Cheetos in the first place?
Or like a Cheeto flip.
Yeah.
Replace that fucking.
You know, it's funny, I can hold these cipher, so it's like, yeah.
Oh, that's why. I was like, why is it look so good? Is there a way to do it? But is there a way to do it where you don't use another one and you just merge the.
Oh, shit. Classic photo. I don't know, because like all these photos are kind of like looking off to the side. And I noticed that all the photos do is just holding on. Here's some new versions. Actually, I wasn't, but now that I think about it. It's like 5 o'clock.
I just screamed out in the comments so it's the everything. What is this top secret?
Open it. Are you like Destin? Is this your cover? Are you like Jason Bourne?
I'm actually scared of opening this right now. There's like something inside of it too. Should I open it? Next to the gas leak. Oh, that'd be so awesome. Actually, I'm kind of scared. All right, I'll keep it away from you guys. Oh, I know what this is. Hey, thank you. I'm so glad I didn't blow up this time. Yeah. Hey, it came with pins. Look at that. I'm gonna keep this top secret thing to fuck with my friends too. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Get good. Get better at Warhammer. You're actually doing pretty damn well. I'm gonna tell him I have this person that kind of sucks, but whatever. Oh my god, why the hell did you guys create this? Why does it fit so well? I'm not even French. All right. Stateful components are dope. So stateful components are going to be classes. All right. And the concept of state is actually really important because so far we've been working with what are called dumb components. And I swear this isn't something I come up with. This is actually like what people call it conventionally. But now we're actually going to start calling it stateless or dumb components, right? These components render JSX, receive props, and embed JavaScript expressions inside of themselves, but they don't maintain their own state, right? We've actually been maintaining state a lot over our applications, right? When we maintain state, we say, oh, okay, well, this is going to be the value of something, and this is what it gets changed to. This is the value of something. This is what it gets changed to. This is the value of something. Over time, this gets changed to this. That's essentially state. Right? So we've been maintaining state using things like counters and global variables and state on the server side using all kinds of different things, right? But in the case of React, we actually have what's called a state property that is a keyword, and that is a property attached to a class component. So again, when we use classes, are they real classes in JavaScript? When I say real, are they the classical classical classes? No, what are they? They're essentially just, it's still using prototypal inheritance, right? It's still objects inheriting from other objects, okay? I want you guys to remember that because that actually comes up a lot in interviews for some reason. I don't really care that much about that, but for some reason employers care. Oh, just something that you missed. State is again a special property. So what we're going to do over here is I'm going to run an application in activity 27. So 27, yes. I remember some Spanish. There we go. Okay, 27. Oh wait. So again, what I'm doing is, oh wait, no, I need, what do I need? Where did I put it? I put it in here, there we go. So I'm taking an activity from 27, copying the source, let me just do this. So now, yarn start. All right, so let's take a look at our app.js. So we have a counter in here. So our app component is rendering a single counter component. You guys see that? The counter component, though, has a little bit more inside of it. So this is class counter extends React.component. That's actually a little bit of old syntax. This is the newer one. How can we use object deconstruction again? Yep. Yep. So if I do component from React component, I can actually just do this. You guys remember this syntax? Object deconstruction? This means a variable named component is the same name as the property inside of React as an object. So now I can just do class counter extends component. Now, is this the old way of doing it, or is this a new way? This is a new way. Sorry, I keep forgetting like the old. I started doing this when like React like kind of first came out, and it's like been through like so many stupid iterations now. So state equals this. This is actually a newer way of doing it. So the state, remember, is a special property that's attached to the class. So state is actually all maintained in this class for this object. Or sorry, I shouldn't say object yet, for this class. And again, which way does our data get passed inside of React? Top down, right? It's a unidirectional workflow, a unidirectional data flow at least. So this state, what data type is it? It's an object, right? Oh, you guys can still see my screen, right? Okay, cool. The properties in count, and then the value is 0. So I mentioned counter before. You've used counters before, right? How would you normally set a counter? The concept of a counter. Yeah, you put into a variable counter, and then you have a function that is going to iterate over it, right? Yeah, exactly. So Lewis mentioned it. You do var count equals 0, and then you would then increment it using some kind of function, right? Like count plus plus somewhere in your application. That's how we did it before in our previous applications that we built. In this case, we're doing something very similar. We have a property. In this case, this handle increment is a property of the class, which makes it a what? It's a method, right? Again, this class is still just a what? It's a function, right? So it's kind of weird because it's like a function that returns an object and does all this kind of stuff. You can still think of it as a function. So it's essentially a method off of the class counter, right? So this handle increment, what it does, and you guys notice that it's using the ES6 version of the function syntax, right? So do you guys notice on line 11 that how many parameters are there? 0, right? And then it's using the arrow syntax. We can actually shorten this if we wanted to one line. I don't know why they didn't. Oh, maybe because they wanted the comment. Am I blind? Yeah, I'm blind. Excellent. Okay, cool. So that can actually be put on one line. So this dot set state is how you actually, this is the only way that you set the state. The state first actually, okay, so this is where it also gets a little confusing. When you change the state in React, the only way that you want to do it is through a function that also, or a call to a set state. I would say setting state is only done through a function by set state. You shouldn't be setting state directly using any other methodology. You should generally be just using a method to set state, all right, or a function to set state. And you'll see why, because again, we want a very unidirectional data flow. The purpose of having a unidirectional data flow is you know exactly where the data is coming from, instead of having to maintain multiple sources of where the data is going to come from, where it goes to, and how it moves around. It's always top down. So you can just debug super easily. Like, oh, here it is. This is the issue. Here it is. Right? Let's go. All right, it's not here. Okay, one more up, one more up, one more up. Right? You don't have to go to like siblings and like, other children and random global instances and stuff like that. All right. And it's going to be hard to like visualize in your head right now because we're just getting into this, but we'll go into that a little bit more. So what this does over here is when I set state, this handle increment is saying, okay, set state, find the count, or if it doesn't exist, create it inside of the state. Take the existing state of count and increase it by 1. So at this point, it starts off at what? 0. And when this handle increment is called, the count will be set to what? 1. So if you take a look at our JSX over here, you'll notice that we have a button and we have this onClick. Now this onClick is an event handler that's built into React. And so this is our way of actually handling events inside of React. Our event handling is going to be on a per element basis. Okay. So event handling is done on the element. So for example, if I need to handle events on this button, I'll just add an event handler. So for example, onClick is handling the click event. And then I would say, okay, what's gonna execute when I do this? Well, I could write the function here. That's not really a great way to do it unless it's like a really, really short function. So I would set it up here. Notice that this is my call. Anytime I click on the onClick, and again, you guys have done this in a different way. Right? What did you guys generally use before? jQuery. You guys use jQuery, right? You guys did what? Button on the button element, class name button, whatever, or ID. You do dot on. You just do on click or whatever, and then you just do okay. Execute this function. Same thing. You guys notice that? It's the same thing. So you're not doing anything too crazy. You're pretty much doing the same thing in different ways, right? So anytime I click on this button, what happens? It increments the count by 1. And you might be thinking, it's like, well, okay, that increments it, but that's still only in memory. So then how am I supposed to use that data? Well, that's where this comes in. So you can actually get the state of the element at any, or sorry, the state at any point and render it wherever you want to render it. And this is based on the set state and based on the current state it is at. So the click count is using this expression, this.state.count. And this gets updated based on this onClick. You see this click count over here? So that's what's happening over here. If I click on this, that is all because of this onClick. Now again, we're not storing anything in memory. So I refresh this, it's all gone, right? So we're still, just because it has state doesn't mean we're storing state, right? We're maintaining state. Difference. Yeah? Okay, what was I doing? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, by the way, this shortcut, you don't actually need to use the constructor to generate the state property because of how Create React App allows us to use the property initializer syntax. This will come into play when you guys are using my application. There's a difference in syntax there, just a little caveat. So generally before, you would have to put the state inside of the constructor. God damn it. Something like that. I forgot how it goes. So you'd have to put the state inside of there. Is constructor a function? That's an op. No, it has super inside. I forgot. I don't know. I don't remember the exact syntax, but it's inside the constructor. Okay, okay, that's the same, blah, 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 blah. Cool. Wait, this is really easy. It's not gonna take 10 minutes. You guys are gonna create a decrement counter. That's just minus. All right, I'll give you guys 2 minutes to do this. All right, so do activity 28. It shouldn't take more than 2 minutes to create a decrement counter. Heather, did you want to ask a question about what decrementing is or something snarky? How is React? Why is React? How is React working? Margaret, you missed the point with me. I'll meet you algorithms. You'll meet you algorithms. That makes me on paper and pencil. Accurate. All right. So was that very difficult? How did you change the plus to a minus? Mind-boggling.
Wait, what's a plus?
Oh, having me here. She said, "What's a plus?" All right, I forgot what I was saying. Okay, so do you guys realize that to create a decrement, the difference would be this? Wait, there. Decrement. -1. That's it. I mean, I could just create, okay, fine. If you want me to actually do it, the real whole thing. God, this is so stupid. I don't want to do this.
Then don't do it.
I don't have to. Yeah, I do what I want. I'm not gonna do it. You guys know I'm not gonna just duplicate it just to show the two different things. That's pretty good though. You guys fuck with me. You got me. It's basically this. Yeah, it's the same thing. You guys know it's the same thing, right? I hope you guys are messing with me. Okay, cool. I'd be concerned about your programming abilities at this point. Yeah, bonus. Yeah. Yeah. Oh God. All right. So remember we talked about the friend card stuff that Luis mentioned something about making that more efficient. You guys are going to do that refactor now. So work on that for about 20 minutes, so until 1:30. Until 1:25 though, I don't want you guys to work with each other. Then 5 minutes in, then you guys can discuss amongst yourselves. At 1:25, you guys can discuss amongst yourselves. And then you guys can ask questions. You just walk around, make sure no one's like watching the entire time. Damn it, Shane!
Come over here.
He has 2 laptops. No discussing. Until 1:25. Oh, airplane? Yeah, if you're having system issues and stuff like that, or conceptual questions, not related to directly the activity, then I can answer. Oh, wait, you work here. I get that copy. Okay. Okay. You guys can discuss now.
Are you coding?
Hmm. Hmm. Wait, which activity was this? 29. Okay. Hmm. So let's take a look at how we can refactor activity 29. So for this one, again, you copy over the source. So this goes into what Luis mentioned, which is that instead of rendering each friend card manually, you'd loop over the friend cards and dynamically display the information for each one. You'd refactor the app component, so it's a class component. Add functionality so that when the red X icon on a friend card is clicked, it's removed from the page. It tells you what to do in order to do that. So why don't we take a look at what they gave you so far? So you start off with the app.js. You have the friend cards that already exist. You have the friends.json, which contains the information about all the different characters from SpongeBob. You also have the friend card, which exists in its current state. Let's see. And you also have the wrapper, which just contains the wrapper for all your stuff. That's just going to be a wrapper component. Okay. So the first step you want to take when you look at this is, okay, I have these friend cards, and these friend cards are going to take in different information from somewhere else. So the location of that information that I'm trying to pass into these components is coming from where? JSON, right? What .json? Friends. So our friends.json, what kind of data type actually is it? It's an array, which means that we can just iterate through it like we would an array, right? Because it is an array. So in our app.js, if we're already including friends.json, and instead of us putting each friend in there manually, what can we use from the friend card that we defined in a previous activity that would allow us to pass in information dynamically for each element? Map, right? So you can refactor this using map, take the information from friends.json, and pass it to each friend. So why don't we work on that part first? So you look over here. Well, I don't want to show that part yet. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So over here, we have this.state.friends.map. Now, this friends is probably referring to the array that's coming from friends.json. Might be thinking, it's like, well, why are we storing this friends? I can't hide all this. All right. So just focus on this. So what happens with this is actually shorthand. If you have a property and an object that has the value with the same name, meaning that if you want to name the property the same name as the value, for instance, if the value is a variable name, then what you could do is this shorthand syntax. This is the same thing as me doing this, right? Another shorthand syntax for JavaScript. All right, this is the same thing as this. That's redundant. New syntax. Do you see that? Not too crazy. Things that make sense. From here, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, I'm storing the state of friends. And again, the friends.json hasn't changed. We're just storing the array inside of state. So what's happening is we're now saying, get the existing state.friends and then map over it. Okay? So we want to be able to use this state of friends because in case we need to update friends with anything, it's being updated in our state and not updating or not attempting to be updated from a file that we're importing, because that wouldn't work. So what we did was we said this.state.friends.map. And again, when we have map, what is the callback function essentially doing? It iterates over each what? Each what? Element in the array. The element is defined by, in this case, what? Each element. What is the variable that's representing each element in the array in this case? Usually it's item, but what is it in this case? Friend. Yeah. So friend. This then executes and generates, right? It's creating a new component each time. It's actually now calling the friend card. So like, it's weird because it's like, some people say instantiating. I don't like that it's instantiating. It's not really instantiating. It's creating a new, and we're using the function. We're calling the function. So we're calling this component. So we're calling this component friend card, and we're creating it. And we're passing the following, what are these in general? What are all these? They're not just attributes. What are they? When we pass something to a component like this, what are they? They're props, right? They have attribute-like syntax, but they are not actually attributes, right? Attributes are generally for HTML syntax. We say they look like attributes to give an understanding of what they look like and how they act, or how they are written. But the way that we use them is that they are actually arguments to a function, right? So these are props inside of our component. So we passed what? Remove friend. Now we won't worry about that yet because that's the second part of the functionality. ID, key, and again, key is used for identification of unique elements so that we give each one a unique identifier. Just so when we need to update everything, it updates a lot faster, right? So this gets stored inside of the virtual DOM in memory and is able to then say, oh, if you need to update anything, it doesn't do it inefficiently. It does it a lot more efficiently. And we also pass in all this other stuff, right? Friend not named, image, occupation, location, right? Nothing too crazy so far, right? So if we take a look at the friend card, notice it's pretty much the same, right? So all we did was really, at this point, when we worked on this specific issue, we said that we want to add these different props iteratively. And that takes care of that, right? Over one function loop. So now you can have an infinite amount of friends, technically, right? So let's say that you're on a Facebook application and this is an API call to your database of friends. That can all just get populated in here with this for loop, or not for loop, I keep saying for loop, map, which is essentially a loop over your array. It's a higher order function. And notice that instead of just using basic HTML markup, we start using components inside of our app.js. Even though it's like something small, like friends list, it's like, okay, why does that need anything? It's just starting to get into this concept of everything becoming a component and being self-contained. So instead of using raw markup, we start using more of these components. So that one's not too bad. This part was a little bit more tricky, so I wanted you guys to understand that. Any questions about that before I get to the remove friend? Yeah. Yeah. In this case, it really doesn't matter if you have it inside of state, but what you're doing is when we need to update state of friends, then you would actually need this state to actually exist. So we're going to be reusing this. We know we're going to be reusing this state of friends soon. And so what we do is we put that into state so that we can maintain it on our own. If we're importing it, we can't really change it. Generally, you shouldn't be changing the existing state of an array, even though it is mutable. But we want to update it in our own state so that we can then like change that or like filter it or do whatever we want with it, instead of just relying on an import. In this case, it's actually not that relevant because you don't see it being used in like multiple use cases. We are going to get to one more use case where we have this friends being used that's not coming from the import, but we are still not using a great example of why we would want to put it into its own state. So it doesn't seem like it's relevant right now, but when we start maintaining and updating state of different things that is not like an array or something like that, then it will start to become more relevant, because then we actually start updating it. So for example, let's say that you import something that has a bunch of data in it, right? And you want to update that data in your local machine and then set it to something different. Well, if you're trying to update that state, you can't update something that you imported the data from, right? Because you're importing that data, you can't really change that data. So instead what you do is you say, okay, so I'm importing that state and then update that state using set state in your own local machine, or sorry, in your own file. And then from there, you just can send that information to your database. So that keeps your local variation of your data on your machine, as opposed to just importing the data and not having mutability. Any other questions about that? All right, so let's get to the method. So our next order was, where is it? Add functionality. So when red icon or red X icon friend card is clicked, it is removed from the page. Okay. So actually, this might do it. Let me see. Let me see if this is actually a good example of that. So what happens is we have remove friend, and this remove friend has a single parameter ID. And remember, we so far have created a bunch of different friend cards, and we've stored it inside of, well, we haven't really stored it. We've listed a bunch of friend cards, and so we've created a bunch of these friend cards. And then now what we're doing is, let's see. Yeah, so let me make sure that this actually has it, just to be sure. Yeah, it does have ID. Okay, cool. So now what we're doing is we're taking the existing state of friends, that's just the imported version of friends. So this has nothing to do with this one over here. So what's happening is it takes the existing friends that we have imported and put into state. It filters it. So remember, the filter returns only things that match this over here. So when we pass in a function, that function is going to say, okay, it has to match these following parameters, meaning that it has to match this function call. Otherwise, don't put it into this new array that we're storing into const friends. Okay. So now this actually, yeah, this is a good example. So Vu was asking before if maintaining state for friends makes any sense. And I mentioned in this previous example, it doesn't really. It is a decent example in this one, actually. It's okay in this one. So for this method, you'll notice that we're actually creating a new array. And this is filtering the existing friends array, and we're storing a new state of friends that only has friends that have an ID. Right? So what's happening is, if an ID is doesn't exist inside of the element, this state gets updated with an array of elements that don't have the ID inside of it. And that's going to become relevant soon. So when we update state, what happens is your virtual DOM then kicks in and says, oh, you've updated something. Oh, you updated the state of this. Oh, I need to change everywhere that this friend state exists. So notice that, let's see. Over here, we're using this .friends. So what's going to happen is this is going to loop over again after this executes, and it's only going to run friend card with the existing friends. Now, after we execute this method, what friends are going to exist over here inside of this friends array? The only ones that have what? An ID property, right? So what do you think we're doing when we remove, when we use this remove friend? How do you think we're using this then? Yeah, you're probably removing ID, right? So why don't we take a look at that? So I'm passing, notice that I'm passing this remove friend. And you're like, wait, you're passing a method as a property? And don't forget that methods can be passed by reference, right? So I can pass this dot remove friend, which is coming from here. and I'm setting it to the same name. So this dot remove friend is remove friend. And then if I go into friend card, how would I use the remove friend that was passed in here? How could I access it? Dot notation off of props, right? So if I go to the bottom over here, remember the way that we execute on click inside of elements is using this on click event listener. You guys see that? So again, now what's happening is when we on click, we are now, the reason we're not just saying props.remove friend is we want to actually execute this function with an argument being passed in. This looks a little funky, but remember when I said that you can call function expressions directly in there. You could have done this in regular jQuery as well, but you probably shouldn't. So this is saying whenever I click, this is creating an anonymous function, or this is executing an anonymous function, and it's going to execute props.removeFriend. So it's calling this method over here, and it's passing it this props.id, right? So anytime I click on this X button, what happens is it calls this method, removes the, it calls this method that basically takes in the ID of this element, of this component. And then what happens is this triggers this set state. Sorry, the set state actually triggers this to be reloaded, which means that you're then going to see a rehash of all the different friend cards. And because the way that React works, it actually runs really quickly. It'll only update for those that changed, right? So it's not going to have to loop through everything. It's only going to loop through and update the ones that are necessary to update. So this is actually really important. This is where it gets kind of tricky, because you are actually having this unidirectional data flow, right? My method that I'm using in this dumb component, you guys notice that this is a dumb component? Why is it a dumb component? It's not maintaining state. Now, I passed it this method as an argument. And again, that's just a prop, right? To this friend card, to every friend card created, I passed it this remove friend. So now every remove friend every friend card now has, where is it? Has this span, which has an event listener that says, okay, if someone clicks on this X, I will call the remove friend that is coming from my parent. And then I will execute this. That will update the state, and that will re-render what needs to be re-rendered. Make it a sense? Hopefully going through it twice helped a little bit. No, that one was a little tricky, so I went through it again. Questions on that? Yeah, Edmond.
Can you just clarify again how the key works? Because I tried to use the props.key, but it doesn't actually propagate down into
Yes.
the props object.
Props.key is used by React like it's like automagically on like their side to keep track of what data, what the unique identifier for React is for that component or that element, depending on how you used it. So it's used in map specifically just for that. So it's not for us to use that key value pair. It's just for the React compiler to actually be like, okay, I know what elements existed here, and then this is in the virtual DOM, and then I can just go back and update it quickly. Yeah. So it's not for us. If you want to pass in a unique identifier, use the same unique identifier you did for the key and pass that in as a prop, which is what we did over here. right? Because we just passed in the props.id directly. It's not duplication because we're not sending the props.key. If we were, it would be duplication. Any other questions? Yeah, Grant.
Why in the on-click we need that PS6 style callback thing as opposed to just callback?
So if we just did props.remove friend, I don't think it would allow you to pass in a argument of props.id. I believe so. If you try to execute it like this, I think that what happens is you have to execute it like this, which won't let you do. So what you actually have to do is it's a callback function because the onClick takes in a callback function and says that you have to execute it as such, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on the syntax, but I think that's the case. Can you double check that? It does? Okay. Okay. So I always forget these things, but like with React, it specifically asks for a callback function to execute so that it's kind of weird because you're passing in a function call to another function call. But it makes sense if you think about it because it's like, okay, you're not just passing in a function again, you're actually calling the function. In order to call the function, you can't just call the function as such, you actually have to call it. The onClick takes a callback function. It's weird because I'm passing in an argument to the function that I'm trying to call. So it's like function, then I'm able to call multiple things. So in this expression, I could have actually called multiple function calls too, because this is just a callback function. I know, it's pretty meta. This is where people get confused. I know. Just ask me questions. That part's stupid. It's fine. Just remember that you don't even have to remember that. Just if you need to execute a function call with arguments being passed to it, just remember that you have to call a function within a function instead of an event listener. Yeah, I think I should do a fist of 5 with React. I wanted to get to forms, but I think we should just actually then checkpoint. Yeah, I don't think we have time for checkpoint. Let's just do a fist of 5. Can you do a fisty 5? Mike, can we do a fisty? Oh no, we just do it on the anonymous fisty 5. How do you do it again? And then I just put a question, right?
And then reset,
Space reset.
and then send it out. Again.
Okay. Now I run fist of 5. And I'm going to say, oh wait, shit, I just sent that to TAs. Okay, hold on. Perfect. Okay, now I was going to do, okay. How are you doing so far with understanding React? What do I do? So I can't give a question. All right, so this is a fist of 5 with how you feel you're understanding components and props. And classes. I got a button. Wait, Vaibhav, that's not how you do it. Damn it, guys. You guys can click on it. Damn it, Steven. Stop. Oh God, now everyone's gonna do it. I hate you guys. That one just looks like it's flipping me off. I know you all too well. Right before I said it. That's a 1 then, right? Okay. What? You can't vote with the picture. What does that mean?
It means I understand it the way I
Oh, okay.
understand it.
Oh, 100%. God damn it. All right, so I would suggest just practicing the stuff. Today's activities, just go over, practice them, redo them again until you get it. Discuss with each other from beginning to end what's happening. I would suggest that. All right. Good work, everyone. I'm glad that everyone's at 1, 2s, and 3s. Oh, a few 4s. Look at that. This is actually slightly above average. All right, off stars.